Welcome to Celtic Stuff Live on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for the Boston Celtics. I'm Justin. John is with me. It's been a while. Oh, man. I think we took like almost a month off. I'm completely clueless. It's all my fault. And John, we're back together again so that you can get me up to speed. At least there's some light at the end of the tunnel that there may be some basketball played, and they might finish out this season a little bit and do some playoffs. And then there'll be a delayed start to next season, probably a shortened season. I'm sure that this is a great opportunity for them to experiment with some things, kind of see how it goes over. And we've said for quite a while on this show that 82 games is a lot of games for these players to play. They've tried to shorten it up by shortening the preseason, starting a little, all kinds of little things like that to try to tweak it, less back to backs. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to see a shorter season, and maybe they'll be even more creative with the playoffs.
Well, yeah, it sounds like, certainly with the 22 teams and turning into a play-in tournament, or potentially into a play-in tournament for both the final roster spots in both the East and the West. It sounds like there's very possibly some really intriguing things. Some things will be forced upon them given the 22 team nature of the kind of end of this season, but also just in the fact that they're playing in a bubble environment with no home court. There's a lot of things that change, and for that matter, they haven't really dealt with lottery odds and some of the other kind of tertiary aspects other than trying to get down to one NBA champion. Everything else is kind of like, well, that's secondary to let's figure that final piece out of who's the champion, and then everything else kind of falls into into play. And so if they're looking to start here at the end of July, training camps opening up in the beginning part of July, we're about a month away from seeing basketball players play. And in fact, today, there was some video of Jason Tatum and Gordon Hayward shooting around at the Auerbach Center. So, that's a sign of actual basketball, which is kind of nice. Instead of talking about it, potentially, maybe, possibly, could be, it's real somewhat. So now the question is, can we get to July without the whole state of Florida spiking and turning the whole thing on its head? And then, can these teams figure it out and get through it and play without, a massive outbreak of the the COVID amongst the NBA players, friends, teammates, support staff, and so forth. So,
well, a lot of articles coming out right now, John, that are not substantiating in other countries that are doing a great job of tracing and tracking that the asymptomatic or the individuals that are not showing any signs or symptoms actively, that that transmission does happen, but extremely low. And so I think if they're just checking temperatures, quarantining people that have, the sniffles or body, you know what I mean? If they just get all over that and just continue to track and trace and get the active symptomatic people out of the way, they're going to have I don't think they're going to have that big of a problem, to be honest with you. The bigger issue is going to be, the families and hanging out and, making sure that everybody's sort of adhering to that. But don't get me started because this is not going to be a COVID show because I am COVID fatigued.
yeah,
But it's
right.
obviously a factor. It's a factor when it comes to the draft too. I mean, I haven't really read up a lot on what they want to do with that, but there are players that, presumably are not going to be collecting paychecks until 6 months later or 7 months later or whatever it is, depending on how they do this draft. I would like to see them do the draft potentially even before the playoffs start, but I don't think there's any chance that's going to happen now. But I almost think that would be a great way to kick this thing back in action rather than trying to do the draft after the playoffs. The problem is, to your point, how do you determine the seeding then? And that's where nobody's going to get on board with it, because there's 8 teams out there that already feel like they're going to get left out of, potentially ad revenue and all sorts of things, because, right now there's no plan, although they're trying, there's no plan for them to play any games.
That's right. Yeah, they don't have a schedule yet. I mean, there was some talk that they would figure out the next eight games for each given team, and that would be the schedule for those 22 teams. Of course, they have to somehow fill the void that those 8 teams that aren't participating, figure out how to balance that schedule out. And then I'm sure there's some that it won't be completely true, but then there's also probably some desire to follow what was going to happen. So, for example, the Pelicans had the easiest schedule remaining out of any team, and they were but a handful of games behind Memphis for the 8th spot in the West. Now, everybody's schedule got harder because you got rid of those 8 worst teams. But is there going to be some deference given to, like, well, the Pelicans, if all things were even, would have had a chance to play against those worst teams? I mean, I think some of this talk gets a little bit far down the road. I mean, listen to Zach Lowe and Simmons and Russillo and all of these guys. I feel like some of it is they're trying to go too far down the road. Big Three podcast. They're trying to go really too far down. I guess it's winning plays now. Anyway, point is they're going too far down the road. I feel like, to try to make everything exactly the way it was. And like, you have to. To me, the NBA has
No,
to
they
do
got to
whatever they
scrap
can.
that.
Exactly, give it
They
up.
got to
Right? You
scrap
can't.
it, do something different, and know that nobody's going to be happy, and the only way to solve that is a total flat revenue share. We all kick in, we all share in it. No one team benefits more than the other, because everybody's taking some losses right now, right? In the sporting world, everybody's taking a hit, and if you want this product to even come back anywhere close to normal, even if they do something creative and it works and they decide to shape the new NBA around that, like, they should be thinking about marketing something totally new and different. They're never going to hit a reset button like this again. Never have that opportunity. They could just come out and literally call it and market it going into next season, the new NBA.
Yeah.
And right now, they just got to take a socialist kind of attitude and just, I know there's a buzzword. Somebody's listening again. If we just take a socialist kind of like perspective on it, share the wealth. Here's where the issue is going to really come into play, though. Regardless of the revenue, the players that are going to play, if you do sort of spread that out, the players that are going to play, I'm curious as to whether or not they're going to be more injury prone after all this time off. Some of the players maybe had access to facilities in their homes, like we know some of the higher profile players, are going to have a gym literally in their house. They have that kind of money, but I don't think all the players necessarily have those kinds of in-home facilities and may not have worked out. Really, really hard to know, what the potential for that is. And so then if you're looking at it like you're spreading the wealth, the teams that aren't putting their players at risk, um, their players, I should say, at risk for injury, and then you get a big name like, I'm not going to mention any Celtics, but let's say LeBron
LeBron
gets
James.
injured. Yes, right my mind.
Giannis.
Giannis.
Embiid.
Embiid's, yeah, he's risky anyway. Like, actually, if anything, if
Yeah, right.
anything, Philly got helped. They were in some serious injury trouble, and now these guys have a chance to get healthy. Let's dive into that in just a second. But I just want to remind everybody to follow Celtic Stuff Live on Twitter at CSL_tweet live. You can follow me at CSL_Justin. John is at CSL_Duke, the entire CLNS Media Network at CLNS Media, Facebook.com/CLNS fans, and download the CLNS Media app for iOS and Android. Simply search CLNS Media in your app marketplace, and the YouTube channel, youtube.com/CLNS Media. So, yeah, John, like Philly, how lucky did they pan out in this scenario? They could perform way above where they were headed, thanks to a few months off and being able to recuperate.
Yeah. Well, and well, I'll tell you what. The one that, maybe maybe. Being off has never helped Joel Embiid though. So, I don't know that I would trust that Embiid is going to walk back in and look like his old self. Apparently, he's working
But
out
they
6 days
weren't
a
any
week.
worse. Weren't going to be any worse
Well,
than where they were. That's the
well,
thing. There
yeah,
was
but
a
I don't.
really good chance he wasn't going to be okay for the playoffs had
No,
they started in mid-April.
it's true, but I think that the fundamental issue with that team, it there's nothing that the health was going to fix. I mean, even if they get past Boston, even if they get past Toronto, right? One, I don't know if they have the horses to get past Milwaukee, and two, they have no spacing. Like it's just it boggles my mind how they just continue to play and beat their head against that wall as if it's 1983 again, and think they're the faux Sixers. They're not. Like that game is gone, man. You got to have threes and you got to space. And you watch these games with the Sixers, and I've watched some of them, kind of through this quarantine stuff, and it's crazy. The spacing is just absolute bananas what they're doing. And it's because Ben Simmons refuses to shoot. And until he decides to shoot, and watching some old Celtics games, watching Rondo, at least he was not in a spot. He wouldn't shoot, but at least he was spaced out on the floor. They
Yeah, he
got
was moving. He was
yeah,
always moving.
totally. And Ben Simmons is, in the dunker spot, or it's just that's not the way you can play with your best player or second best player. Clogging things up for your best player. It just doesn't work. So until that happens, I don't have any faith in Philly. I don't care how good they are defensively. I don't
Good.
think they got enough offensively to make it
Good.
go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good. 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 It's good. It's all very good. So here's another thing. I am worried about the injury factor. I'll be honest with you,
Boston?
and yeah, well, yeah, Boston. I mean, the one thing Boston kind of got a lift too because Kemba was struggling a little
Totally.
bit there, health wise. So we got a little bit of a lift, but I am worried about that team. Maybe even Hayward got helped out. Hayward's a guy who's made enough money. I don't know if he has a court at his house or not, but he's a guy who's made enough money. He might have one outside. You know what I mean? Like
Nope.
nothing. No, how do
No.
you know? Have you been
It,
there?
dude, it's Instagram, man. His wife, it's Robin. She was gonna buy one, and then he's like, no, don't do it. And it's yeah. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we've learned about these players, and Robin is her own story, but like there's so much you learn because of this. Yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, but
I
yes,
may want to hear that story, even if we don't want to talk about it on here.
right, yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
like if you don't think it's good podcast material, that's fine. I'm
Well,
capturing you for 20 minutes after this, so you can tell me.
she's a little crazy. That's all I'm saying. She may be the right kind of crazy, but she's crazy. And so, it's she apparently was going to buy him one, and he said no, and I don't know. Anyway, he showed up today at the facility, had a mustache on. So I don't know what the hell's going on there with that guy. But
Handlebar?
Daddy's always
Handlebar?
happy, I guess. Yeah, handlebar. I think
Handlebar?
he's gonna wax the ends of it.
Ah, the little spinner, no good. He needs handlebar. I want to do handlebar. You know what I mean? Like at some point, I'll just rock the. I don't think my wife would ever even like. She'd
Yeah.
kick me out. She'd
I,
kick me out.
I think
Handlebar.
Robin would definitely kick him out if that's the case. I don't think he has choices over his facial hair. It's my guess. Anyway,
I don't know if that is the right kind of crazy, bro.
no,
So
but
here's
listen, but like you're right though. Like you look at what's going on in Europe, and Germany started playing soccer, and they've had a lot of guys with muscle pulls, like leg, hamstring stuff, adductor, all kinds of like muscle pulls and stuff like that. And I think we're going to see a lot of that. I hope that's all we see. My big fear is you're going to see some catastrophic stuff too. The knees and the Achilles and stuff like that, and that would be that would really be an issue, certainly for the league to come back and have that kind of be the story of this.
But see, that's why when you're talking about getting down the road and trying to get it back to normal, that is exactly why they need to come up with something creative. You know what I mean? They can build it in where there's some days off. The way, I mean, if they're not traveling, like just think about how much time is spent on a plane that they can use that time all being camped out in Florida to spend more time with the trainers, more time light practicing and scrimmaging, conditioning, some things like that. And I realize like an athlete can only do so much. I'm not saying like intense workouts, but I can also tell you that sitting on a plane for 6 or 7 hours in a sort of contracted seating state, you know what I mean, is not always great. And so they could spend a lot more time instead of sitting on a plane. They could spend a lot of time with the trainers getting stretched out and making sure that the muscles are pliable. They're gonna have to pay a lot of attention to hydration and things, like just really, really digging in on some of that. So if we're talking about it, there's no way that the teams haven't already thought about this and are trying to figure out ways to deal with it. So that's something to keep a major eye on. We could talk about Jaylen Brown a little bit here in a second.
Mhm.
12 hours in a car. But first, there is no shortage of action going on at our exclusive partner, betonline.ag. NASCAR is back, and BetOnline has hundreds of games, events, and sports to still get in on. You can bet on simulated NFL, NBA, and UFC. I'm thinking in those simulations for the NBA, there's injuries, or even participate in a $10,000 Madden bracket challenge, a March Madness style NFL simulation tournament you can enter for free. And coming up next Sunday, Bet Online has ex Chicago Bulls Ron Harper, Horace Grant, Bill Cartwright, and Craig Hodges joining them to discuss the Michael Jordan documentary on what they are calling the final dance. Visit the website or use your mobile device and join today to receive your new welcome bonus and check out all the action. Bet Online, your online wagering solution. Yeah, we talked a lot about the final dance. I don't know that I want to. Here's my thing about the final dance: way too much drama after the final episode, and I gotta tell you, John, like even the last couple episodes, I started losing it. I started falling asleep in it. Like I don't. Did you feel like there was a little bit of an anticlimactic or almost like it was disjointed as it was closing?
Well, I knew how it was. I knew the end. So
Yeah, hard.
it's like watching Titanic. I knew the boat sinks. Um, I it, there. What I actually I would say to
The
your point though.
Yeah, it's a travesty the way they portrayed Pippin, but go ahead. Say what you were gonna say.
Well, I think it was fair. I think it was fair how the way they showed Pippin because it showed how great Pippin was, but it showed the error of that singular biggest moment when Jordan wasn't on the team, and it was the biggest moment of that era from the moment Jordan retired to when he came back. Um, I liked the early stuff in particular, kind of the early years of how he came up. I think it showed accurately that he's a maniacal guy. I thought it really did show a true picture of who he was. Yeah, but I think anybody who watches it should be watching a bit with a grain of salt and saying he's a great player. You need to know he's a great player. I appreciate the fact that there are people who are uneducated about how good he was and who could see that and like, oh wow, this guy was amazing. So there is a bit of kind of you play it up more than you necessarily would, but that's true in any situation like that. I felt like I thought it was pretty true, honestly, to my recollections of Jordan and how his impact on the league, but also culturally and everything else. I thought it was a pretty fair shake, and um,
I
I
just mean
think
we spent most of the time, talking about how Scotty was left in the dark on the contract, you know what I mean? And then they, yes, the moment in the playoffs and not refusing to go back out on the floor and like all that. But they I really didn't feel like they spent a whole lot of time talking about all the good that he brought and playing the second fiddle. That was my thing. I felt like they could have rounded his character out, you know what I mean? And they really put him into two facets. The willing, sidekick who takes a pay cut, and then the sulky little bleep that, got what he deserved. But the thing is the team didn't never take care of him either. You know what I mean?
right,
Like the
right.
team never took care of him. And again, that has nothing to do with why he didn't get back on the floor. You know what I mean? And all of that, but it's still um I just felt like there was a little bit more of a complete story there. Like even the guy from, Podunk, Arkansas part was really brief. Do you know what I mean? And there's a great story there. There's a great story for Arkansas there. There's a great story about Pippen. There's a great story about his family. And you're so used to seeing, a lot more about coming out of like the projects, right? Like that's the Stephon Marbury story. And I'm not saying that's a bad story. I'm just saying you don't usually get the Arkansas story, and you're never going to get a documentary about Pippen unless it's tied to Jordan. So this was just a great opportunity, I thought, to spend a little bit more time on that. And I felt like they sold Scotty a little short, to be honest
Well,
with you.
I the one thing I would also say is they spent, a part of every single episode, they talked about one key player of that group in every single episode. They spent a good amount of time on Steve Kerr and his dad and all that all that he went through with that. Obviously, the Rodman stuff.
But those guys weren't there for both sections. Like you got to remember,
Yeah,
Scott,
but it was
anyone
about that.
there
Yeah, but it was
because they
about
went
last
B.J.
season.
Armstrong, John Paxson,
Yeah,
Kerr,
but it
and
was
my
about
point is, it
it
was
was
about
about
the season. Yeah, I
right. It was
got you.
about that 98 season and the last dance. And these are the key pieces that help. The problem is that to look at Jordan, to me, I agree with you. I wanted more about BJ Armstrong. I wanted more about Horace Grant. I wanted more about John Paxson. I wanted to know more about Bill Cartwright. Um, because while that, winning the sixth was
Or
great.
even Horace Grant, because Horace's
Right.
character unexplored too. There were some serious tee ups for the
Right.
Horace explosion that just never happened. They
If
kind of
you
just floated it and let it fly away.
Well, you can tell Jordan was the one who was controlling that, and that's why you know that's why I felt like that's why it happened, because it was going to be what Jordan wanted to say about those guys, and they'll give him a chance, but it was going to be Jordan had the last say on everything. And then two, really, to me, Horace is the guy. He's the third best player of that run of all those teams. You add Rodman, you add. I feel like Horace in those first three was such an important piece of that puzzle. I mean, really, um, he really made a difference against those tough Knick teams. In the first half. I mean, he was such an important piece. And then, of course, there's all that personal intrigue. To me, that's the unexplored piece of this, is that there
Dude,
wasn't
and
talk about.
Scotty Burrell got more play than Horace Grant in that.
Right.
Like, if you think about the featuring of Scotty Burrell, like clearly Jordan had a soft spot. If what
Yes.
you're saying is entirely true about him, puppeteering what they focused on and how he felt, Scotty Burrell got a ton of play thanks to Jordan, and they clearly loved that kid. And because he was even like, it was a sense of pride when he was talking about how Scotty just needed somebody to push him.
Yeah.
And like, there was almost like a little ego in Scotty Rivera. Scotty Burrell would have been shit without me.
Yeah,
you
he
know,
needs somebody to push him, and that's why I rode his ass for 82 games, and then some. I mean,
if
that's
Scotty Burrell played for the Charlotte Hornets,
right. Now
he would
I
have been out of the league in 2 years.
right now I remember Scotty Burrell pretty well, not just because he was on those teams, but he was a UConn guy,
UConn. Yeah,
and
totally.
he was a baseball prospect as well.
Oh, I
Uh,
didn't know that.
Yeah, so there was, he was actually when he came out, it was kind of like, oh, he's, could be something, and it was just funny that was, they kind of zeroed in on him. That I don't know, I thought it was really interesting. What I appreciate about it is just it brought Jordan's greatness back. I'd like to see them do that with others. I'd like to see them do that with Kareem. I feel like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is, and we're seeing this with some of he's getting a more of a voice and people are looking to him with everything that's going on, the George
Right
Floyd,
now. Yeah,
everything.
for sure.
But as a player, the guy was a monster for 20 years almost, and nobody knows it. Nobody talks about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and that guy was so amazing. I mean, he had was it 6 MVPs, 5 MVPs?
The hook
Oh,
shot had been used,
right,
obviously, by the Tommy Heinsohns of the world, like
sure,
players who were very gifted, who are in the Hall of Fame. But
yeah,
there's only one name that's synonymous with that hook shot, and
exactly.
it's Kareem.
Right.
Like if there's a move, he owns the hook shot.
Absolutely.
Everybody knows it.
And it was an airplane, for God's sakes. I mean, come on. But, it's Murdoch, baby,
That's all it
But,
takes.
and I mean, Kareem, as a Celtics fan in the 80s, you never really had a lot of love for Kareem, but like, that guy was an amazing player for a really long time, and the league just didn't have that shine. And part of it's because the league was in a rough spot in the 70s and the early 80s. And as the best player in a team that's in a league that's faltering, you're never going to get the credit. Magic and Bird are going to get the credit because they brought the change. But Kareem was a great player, and his numbers hold up over the test of time. And I'd love to see them kind of explore more of Kareem's. Maybe no one would watch it. Maybe
He
people,
was the easiest. He was
but
the easiest Laker to
totally.
like, right? I mean, as a Celtics fan, Kareem was by far the easiest Laker to like. There
You
was even
respect
you
totally.
respected him. There was a part of him that you just couldn't help but like in a way. There you could even hate Magic Johnson, who's not really a bad guy, right? Like he's not Isaiah Thomas dislikable. And even since then, but because of the heated rivalry, you could place a lot of, I don't like that guy the same way. No, not the same way as LeBron, but you can definitely put that on
Well,
in similar ways.
there's some
Yeah,
similarities there. Yeah.
yeah. But Kareem was a guy I remember liking him. I remember my parents because we didn't have a lot of money and I didn't get the nice shoes. I got Hakeem Olajuwon reject shoes from Martin's. I got and I got a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar basketball. And I'm
Nice.
gonna let out my dirty little secret.
Uh-oh. It's gonna happen. You're gonna say it?
I gotta say it.
Oh God, here we go, everybody.
People are never gonna let me come back from this.
Oh jeez.
I
You're
only
kidding.
just recently told you. I mean,
I
we've been doing
know.
this for 20 years, and I've been keeping my dirty little secret.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so, because I didn't really follow basketball all that close when I was really young, and my parents bought me a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar basketball, and my best friend had moved from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to Maine, and he was a Lakers fan. I definitely I have to get. I'm going to feel so much better after I say this. I definitely rooted for the Lakers for like 3 years.
Oh God.
I thought I'd feel better. I don't feel better.
Silence.
But
You
that's
know,
been, the weight of that
yes.
on me, for so long. And then I left the Lakers and rooted for the Charlotte Hornets in the Alonzo Mourning, Glenn Rice, Kendall Gill. That was kind of my team for a little bit. And then I returned to the Celtics when they were like really bad. But yeah.
We all make mistakes when we're young, Justin. Um, I would say, I mean, Kareem he was respected, but he was probably considered a kind of a whiny bitch a little bit. But I think he was respected nonetheless. I mean, when you're that good for that long, how do you not
You know,
just tip your cap to the
5 minutes
guy?
ago, you're agreeing with me that he might be one of the more
Well,
likable players. Then I let out the dirty secret, and all of a sudden, Kareem's a total bitch.
I just
And
well,
you were just literally like, "We need to hear Kareem's story," and
we
now you're
do.
totally
We
shutting him
do.
down.
Well, we do. I just, as a Celtics fan and you're in the heat of the battle, I don't see myself in 10 years saying, that Mo Williams was really an unsung hero in those Cleveland Cavaliers teams of the late 2000s. That's not going to happen. I'm going to say Kareem is one of the greats of all time leading scorer, on and on and on we go. I mean, multiple. 15-time All NBA, 6-time NBA champion, 2 times Finals MVP, Hall of Famer, 6 times MVP. I mean, that's a hell of a resume right there. But as a Celtics fan, you hate the guy and the best guy on the other team. Magic was tragic, right? But Kareem, I mean, you know, he was he was unstoppable. I mean, you couldn't do anything with him. I think Max has done a good job of late of kind of talking about why Kareem was so good. He had a great interview with Robert Parrish on his podcast, and it was really good to hear those two guys talk because there's just to hear that two teammates going back and forth and just talking about how they respected Kareem as a player. Now, as a fan, I wanted to see Kareem Abdul-Jabbar embarrassed. I didn't care that he was going out and getting a rocking chair and all that. I wanted the Lakers to to cry. I wanted blood, but that's that's what happens when you're a Celtics fan. In the '80s, I mean, there's a lot of passion there. So I just think that we're in a point, with Kareem. He has not gotten that respect, and The Last Dance was its own thing, and Jordan was this cultural phenomenon. Kareem never was that player, but he deserves that respect. So
Yeah, they could spin off on this. Yep, absolutely. They could spin off on this. And I know we're coming up at the end of the show, and we've still got to ride out, at least a month until training camp, and then, probably another 6 to 8 weeks before we see any playoffs. I mean, any games, and then the playoffs after that. So we've got time. We can save the Jaylen Brown, driving 12 hours conversation for the next show, I think. I want to leave time for predictions. So who are they playing? Oh, no.
we can talk about the Jaylen Brown thing real quick. I mean, I don't look
only if you forgive me for the Kareem and the Lakers thing.
No. You get my respect for the Kobe distrust and dislike.
I never liked Kobe.
That gets a lot of.
Just know that the Charlotte Hornets drafted Kobe in the time when I loved the Hornets and traded him for Vlade, right? And then and then it was probably a year after that I bailed and was like, I don't know what they're doing anymore. So
well, they lost Zoe and Larry Johnson and all that.
God, I loved Larry. The Larry's how it happened because I was a UNLV Larry Johnson fan. Grandmama.
So I always would, as the Celtics were bad in those '90s. I always take a second team. Kind of like a team I'd root for.
Yeah.
I rooted for the Magic. When the Celtics were out of it, I was rooting for the Magic. I wanted to see Shaq, kind of dethrone, Michael and kind of lead that. I liked Penny Hardaway and
yeah,
Shaq.
That was
fun. I
kind
of like those teams. Phoenix Suns. I always loved Phoenix and Charles.
Oh, with Steve Nash. Yeah, that was a fun.
No, before
that.
Charles and KJ and Dan
yeah.
Farley, Chambers, David West. I mean, Oliver Miller. I mean, those were some fun teams. Because when the Celtics were bad, it was always like, okay, well, other teams are still playing, so I got to have a rooting interest. And so Charlotte was tertiary, but part of where they lost me is one, they had a lot of North Carolina influence in their uniforms, so that lost me.
Yeah, they did.
So I was not cool with that.
Yeah, I see that. Yep.
And I think with when those expansion teams came in the late '80s, it was like you got to pick one, And so I kind of Greg Kite got drafted by the Magic in the expansion draft, and so I kind of went. I was like, well, I'll root for Kite, I don't know why, but I rooted for Greg Kite. He went to Orlando, and so that was that. But
Muggsy Bogues, I don't know how you can't pull for a Muggsy. That was like, oh, dude, they had Muggsy and Kendall Gill and Larry Johnson, and they got Zoe a couple of years later, I think, right? Out of Georgetown, maybe 2 years. No, was it back to back? Larry and then Zoe?
Yep.
That's right.
Larry's 91, Zoe was 92 draft. Yep.
It was Kendall Gill, Larry, and then Zoe. Yeah. I think that was their 3 picks in a row.
That's right. Yep. And Muggsy started
the
with
expansion draft. Yeah, I was thinking he was an expansion draft pick.
Yep. And they really ran well, but the owner was a complete nut job, and I think they got a little too ahead of themselves, and so they started selling players, and when Alonzo and those Hornets
trade to get Glenn Rice, did Kendall Gill go in that deal?
Yeah, I'm not sure. All I remember is when Alonzo Mourning and that team in '94 beat the Celtics in the playoffs. That was that famous '93 playoff when Reggie passes. that was a year when I was, you watch that and the Celtics, you know, I was hoping, oh, they'll be there, they'll get there, they're gonna come back. I had all these hopes and
Yeah.
dreams, that they'll figure it out, and Larry's gone, but things will turn around. I mean, they got to, right, and unfortunately, it just it didn't happen.
Stroke of bad luck.
Yeah, the first of many, or I shouldn't say the first of many, but first, along the way of it, a number of many, I guess.
Yeah.
It
That
was
was
so
probably the
hard.
most salt. That was probably the most salt in a wound because it's such a likable
Oh,
player.
totally, totally,
Yeah.
likable player. I got to meet him once. He had a camp that he ran
Really?
up in Maine. Yeah, yeah. Soft-spoken guy, sweet guy, and I just your heart broke for him, and he meant so much. He didn't just mean so much for the team. He meant so much for the city. He always had his traditional Thanksgiving baskets that he gave away turkeys, and I mean, he was a community minded guy, and really took the
And embraced.
legacy.
And
He
embraced.
embraced, yeah, because he was in that difficult period of it's the handover of Bird to the next era, and he was the next
Yeah, and
era.
he just hit
Oh,
potential all-star status like
absolutely.
perennially. Yeah.
Right, right. He's 27, had the world in front of him. I mean, think about it, a 27-year-old player now. I mean, that's the entering your prime, the middle of your prime. You're as good as you're going to be, and just struck down
Yep.
like
Six
that.
to
And
7 years. Yeah,
the
ahead of.
90s, the 90s were a tough time, and so you had to look at other areas because if you stayed just rooting Boston, and it was a tough year,
Yeah.
tough time to be
Yep.
a kid, tough time to
You're
be a
right.
kid,
Oh,
and
dude.
and be a fan of teams, right?
Yeah.
Like whether you're in college or high school,
Especially
that's
in
kind of
New
the
England, it was just
right,
rotten.
right.
I think
That's
that
the
yeah, yeah.
that's the vintage you and I are, and we're in high school, college at that time, and those are kind of like your teams, your formative years. It's like, okay, these are going to be my teams. Like the '80s, when I was a kid, that was my team. Okay, Larry Bird, I love Larry, but Reggie's my guy. Like I'm going to high school and all that, and it just, obviously it tragedy struck. But I think, yeah, boy, that was a trip down. That was a winding path during our going down the memory path on that one.
Jaylen Brown and rap.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So, look, what do two guys from Maine, can say about everything going on? Probably not a lot. I probably don't have a whole lot to add. Only that, as a fan of a team who has broken barriers, and I'm just going to talk as a sports fan. I'm not a not a sociologist or anything, but I appreciate the leadership qualities that Jaylen Brown is showing. I appreciate someone who's being forthright about saying the right thing when there could be financial circumstances that could come to harm him. Physical harm could come to harm him. And that guy is standing up and doing the right thing. And his teammates have, Marcus was out there, and his
Yeah, but he
Cantor was
went
out
to
in
his
Boston.
hometown. Yeah,
Right,
I
right.
think it's because he went home.
Sure.
Honestly, right? He went
And got
home
others. Like
and
he's a
got
leader.
others. Yes. Yeah.
He's a leader. I mean, he got Malcolm Brogdon out there. He's got rappers out there. I mean, he's trying to, and he's trying to do it the right way, and just all the respect in the world for that guy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and it's sad, and it's anger. It gets you really angry about what's going on, and um, you know, I just
No, I'm with you. I don't even feel comfortable sharing my views,
right,
not just on any platform. It's just
right,
too intense. You know what I mean? And I'm not the voice, but Jaylen can absolutely be the voice. And I remember when Mark Spears did the piece right before the draft, and everybody was like, almost like, he might be too smart. Too smart could be an issue. But, to your point, the leadership qualities, this team locked him up because they saw something in him,
yeah,
even though they had Jason and, there was all these trades and everything else. And Most assuredly, he would have gone in any package for Anthony Davis, highly likely anyway,
Mm.
but at the same time, they were not going to give up on him, even though all the focus was on Tatum. They weren't going to give up on Jaylen very easily. And I think the thing that is, it's his dedication, right? So you can put that anywhere. Like, he's intelligent, and they said, oh, maybe he's too smart, and whatever. But it's really the dedication. It's the dedication to his craft. It's the dedication to his community. It's the dedication to his team. It's the willingness to be the guy coming off the bench and finding a new way to reinvent himself. Like, there's just a commitment level from him, in a level of responsibility for such a young man that, I think we all forget how young these guys are. Like, I definitely would never have done anything like that anywhere close.
Right.
Never,
Right.
never, because
Right.
I honestly couldn't even get my shit together in my early 20s.
Right.
And then, he's not only is he a multimillionaire with probably every single distraction and opportunity to just be a complete knucklehead, and yet the commitment.
Mm.
And so, in a very big, driving 12 hours to go down there and do that, like you
Mm.
said, getting other people, like, he committed to that cause, and decided very clearly where he stood and what he wanted to do, and he went out and executed it. And I just you have to respect that in anybody who's like under the age of 30.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I mean, I will say, um, you know, I don't, like you said, I don't know how much I can add to his experience or what that means for, how it impacts you. I mean, I live in a state that's probably 99% white. Like, what can I, do? But I think all I can do, there's ways to help and ways to donate money and ways you can support the cause. But I think if you use your voice and you just say, look, I support the ideas of where you're going, and that, at least as an ally, I think as an ally of people who have a voice that should be heard, I think we can do that. I don't think my experience is all that important, but I think I can do what I can to support those who do things I do believe in, but I don't have the words or the background or the experience to be
Let's
able
say
to add
this:
to it. You
you
know,
just believe in bravery.
there you go. Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
yeah. All
And
right.
and I think change is needed, and change is needed. I think change is needed in this world on any number of different levels, and I think that I will say.
Yeah, I'll say this, and it's global. There just needs to be more understanding across the board. I'll
Bingo.
say that,
Yep.
and a
Bingo.
desire to understand. And I feel like that's where Jalen's coming from on so many levels.
Right. Right. There you
All
go.
right, that's going to do it. This broadcast will be available on demand on the CLNS Media mobile app. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at CSL_Justin and at CSL_Duke. A heartfelt thank you to everybody for tuning in. And remember that you can support the show by subscribing to Celtic Stuff Live on iTunes and Stitcher, or harassing us on Twitter when we take a 3 to 4 week break and you want to hear the show. We'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review, because your feedback is important to the show. And for staff writer Samuel Elias, executive producer Larry H. Russell, and the founder of CLNS Media and the one who gave us a kick in the ass to get it going again, Nick Chelso, and
Thanks,
my
Nick.
co-host Jon Duke. Thank you, Nick. I'm Justin Poulin. Thank you for listening to this week's edition of Celtic Stuff Live.